Over the last couple weeks, we have been in the first couple chapters of Genesis, noting how we have these creation accounts sort of told, and then a little bit more specificity told again, and noting that this is all sort of building block, foundational material, the bottom block in the Jenga puzzle of the Bible. Today, we pivot and move into chapter 3, which is a big chapter as well. We've got a little bit, I've talked a little bit about this already, noting that Genesis 2, there's a little foreshadowing of Genesis chapter 3 and the things that are going to come, the command to not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is going to be reflected on now as we see everything begin to unfold. So we're in Genesis chapter 3. Let me read. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to woman, "Did God really say you must not eat of any tree in the garden?" So this is the first temptation that we have unfolding. And the serpent just kind of appears, right? We don't get the backstory. There's a lot that sort of defies explanation. The Bible does not give us a straightforward backstory about the origins of evil. We get a backstory that helps us understand why things are broken, understand why there is suffering, understand why there is pain, understand why there is death. We get an explanation of that, but the explanation doesn't back up quite as far as we would like and explain everything. So part of what we note here is the misstatement that comes from the serpent in response to God's command. He sort of says, the text suggests in feigned disbelief, did God really say that you can't eat from any of this? And so that's an overstatement of what we saw in Genesis 2. And then Eve then corrects the serpent, but she exaggerates in a different direction. So in chapter 2, God said you could not eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Eve adds to it and says, you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge. You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. So no one is actually getting it right, what was said in Genesis 2. So the serpent then puts forward his interpretation. We often talk about Adam and Eve's disobedience being the first sin in the Bible, but in a very real sense, we have a different sin, the presumption of the serpent here, attributing to God false motives and other things. So the serpent then says, you will not certainly die, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So, what the serpent says is full of resentment, right? He sort of slyly is implying, is impugning, false motives and twisting what it is that God has said, and suggesting that it's all just a power play by God's part, and that God is trying to prevent Adam and Eve from enjoying some of the benefits that God had. So we don't. I've complained, I continue to complain, will continue to complain, no doubt, that every square inch of these first few chapters is just loaded with implications and big doctrines, and it's just profound. There's just, you can't turn around without bumping into something that is significant and that could be unpacked. So let me just note, the rest of the story. Eve is going to eat, and then Adam is going to follow, and humanity has not been the same since. The first hint that something has gone terribly wrong is that Adam and Eve are going to be embarrassed to be around each other. They are naked, and they recognize it, and they're going to hide from God. And we saw that in Genesis chapter 2, we saw some of the perfection of male and female relationships, specifically in marriage, and that marriage was foundational to society, and that marriage was part of the blessings that God has given. And then here, just a verse later, we see all of this beginning to crumble. And we see that this whole idea of conflict between the sexes and the complications between the sexes is going to be sort of a genesis for lots of problems and pain in society. We're going to see how that begins to unfold as we continue this week moving through Genesis 3. Have a good day.